Welcome back to the Donkey Vote podcast with Francis.
Tobias.
And George. These interviews will be focusing on the past careers of politicians before they entered parliament.
With a strong intention to our audience that anything is achievable no matter what you studied in university or college.
If you like this sort of content, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share with your friends. Also, we are on YouTube and Spotify, so make sure you follow us on those platforms.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram as well to keep updated with the latest episodes and reels that we release.
Enjoy the
interview.
Today we are joined by the member for KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, Edwin Bath. Edwin, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Francis, and well done with the pronunciation. KwaZulu-Natal, not easy for
KwaZulu-Natal.
people from abroad to be able to say.
Yes, I think I've got some friends actually who are originally from Durban who have immigrated to Australia. So I've heard a little bit about Durban itself. So KwaZulu-Natal, it is a challenging name, but glad I was able to pronounce it. And hopefully our viewers can learn a little bit more about that province with this interview as well, Edwin. So just before we get started with the podcast, Edwin, are you able to give us a little brief description of yourself and even the province that you represent, KwaZulu-Natal, just for our audience out there who may not know an entire lot about yourself and South Africa in general?
100%. So my name's Edwin Macrae Bath. I was born in Durban, which happens to be the biggest metro, or the only metro in the province. South Africa being a country made up of 9 provinces. Yeah, KwaZulu-Natal, really beautiful province, known for its beaches, for the Zululand area. Also big on agriculture, and we've got the beautiful Drakensberg Mountains as well. There's so much that I can say, but I know that there's not enough time to get through it all. Yeah, so I was born in Durban, and I grew up in the Drakensberg, in a very small rural town called Underberg. I think for many of us that know the little town or know what it feels like to grow up in a little town, it's a really great privilege. You're sort of sheltered and shielded from the big bad world, and I certainly had a great upbringing. A lot of it outdoors, spending time in nature, on the river, in the mountains, and yeah, just very fortunate to have had that upbringing, and because it's such a small town, the choices in going to high school were extremely limited. In fact, there was only one high school in the area. So I became what they call in South Africa, a boarder, when I went to high school. Went to high school in the capital of KwaZulu-Natal called Pietermaritzburg. Funny enough, the capital is not the biggest city. It's just the legislative city. Went to high school there and then moved on to Cape Town in the Western Cape province to study my undergrad and my honors. So yeah, I've started my life with a very narrow sort of spectrum of understanding the world. Moved to Maritzburg, got a broader understanding, and then did what I could to get as far away from what was familiar to me and go to Cape Town to have my mind enlightened at university. So yeah, that's a bit of a background. I also, just to summarize my career, have worked in government for the past 11 years. I've just recently turned 34. So I was very fortunately sponsored to study my undergrad and my honors through the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal at the time. I got to study at the University of Cape Town, the number 1 ranking university in Africa, very fortunately, and that led to a career in government. So yeah, I worked in the infrastructure and built environment space. And yeah, it was through my love for the public sector that I eventually decided to step out of my comfort zone and try out politics. And so I don't call myself or see myself as a politician, but it's something that I'm learning to become, or I'm having to become. And yeah, I'm enjoying the journey. So hopefully that gives a little bit of a context for you, Francis.
I think that's a great bit of context there for us to get into your questions, Edwin. So you did touch on this at the start of your little brief description there, but how was your high school and university life? And do you have any memorable moments you'd like to share on the podcast?
So I think that's a very broad question. So many memories and so many experiences, I guess, that I could share. But Let me start with my actual experience, going to high school and university. I think having been forced to become a boarder and see my family, on the occasional weekend and whatnot, it really it bore a lot of independence, or brought a lot of independence into my life. And the memories that I have, the fondest memories that I have were becoming or making a family outside of my actual family, and that being with the other guys that I was at school with and that I was in the boarding establishment with. And yeah, I think moving from there to the University of Cape Town, nothing could have prepared me for the for the horizon of mine that would have,
Mm,
expanded so dramatically, being thrust from a very conservative upbringing in KwaZulu-Natal to this very cosmopolitan, very sort of forward-thinking university, and a university that accepts people from all walks of life and background, a lot of and a very big international student contingent as well. And I think just, for me, just the highlight is just the pure privilege that I had in being able to go to the University of Cape Town and being able to receive an education in the sense of the education that I was very fortunate to receive. As you might be aware, South Africa's history of inequality and subversion really did and continues to, in many aspects, prevent the youth from getting the education that I got. So I must just highlight the privilege that I felt and that I continue to be grateful for.
mm,
And yeah, I think that would sum up, in a nutshell, my education through high school and university.
mm. And would you say as well that move from your small rural town in KwaZulu-Natal to University of Cape Town, do you think that changed your political views and your perspectives on life? As you were saying, growing up in that sort of environment in a rural town in South Africa. I don't know much about rural towns in South Africa at all, but I'm kind of going to assume it's a very conservative place, quite like a lot of rural towns in Australia. And then coming to a big city, it's a bit more of a liberal, and you see a bit more of a liberal place where you see a lot more different sorts of people in society. And so how was that change overall? And like, did it really change your political views on certain things, or did you even really have any political views before you came to Cape Town?
Yeah, so Francis, you're going to be probably very disappointed in my answer. And it's something that I commended you on earlier before coming onto the podcast, is that, I feel that political education is something that is extremely lacking, not just here in South Africa, but even abroad. I was not exposed to or involved in politics at all growing up. Of course, through school we got to learn about the history of our country and apartheid and the like. However, when it came down to understanding, what the importance of your vote means when you turn 18, and what the relevance and what are the relevances of political parties and what they stand for and ideologies, I was not exposed to any of that. Perhaps to some degree, maybe I was not so interested, interested in politics. Like I said to you, I never saw myself ever in this space. But we'll get to the reason why I'm here a little bit later. But yeah, to cut a very long story short, I for the longest time was not exposed to politics, even at university, where you find the student organizations, political organizations quite active. I never took an active, interest in it. And perhaps, that's maybe a small regret that I might have. But regardless of that, it's something that I think the government, that basic education in our country really needs to address. Even just understanding how government works and the different spheres and responsibilities of government. So it's something that I'm advocating for, and it's something that I'm very thankful to you for. Actually, I think you taking that lantern in Australia, and it's something that we definitely need to see more of here in South Africa. Just basic civic education around politics and government, and elections and the importance of these kinds of things. Yeah.
As as I said, I might have said previously, like, the podcast really is all about trying to talk to politicians, not just from Australia, from around the world, and seeing, their perspectives, and how they got into politics, and really trying to show to young people that, you don't have to come from a typical political background, or, come from a high, working high income sort of family to be successful and, to achieve the things you want to achieve in life. And as you said, the podcast inherently as well is really teaching a lot of people, young people as well, about politics and, being more politically active and understanding what's going on. Because, as you said, South Africa does have a different system, and in that, voting is not compulsory, unlike in Australia. But it's still so important to, remember, that your vote really does matter and it does shape your country. And, I've heard a lot of Australian politicians really talk about and advocate for compulsory voting because at the end of the day, they say, um, you know, your vote basically decides where your tax dollars go and where, the government spends the money that you pay in tax. So what's the point of not voting and not having a say of where that should go? So I think it is really, really important that young people, especially even older people in a sense, get educated politically and understand, and understand like politics in general, not like, to be an avid political follower, but have a general knowledge that, they're able to make informed and right decisions when it comes to voting on the ballot box.
100%, 100%. And I must admit also, I missed, or rather, I did not vote in the first couple of elections where I was eligible. And that's certainly a regret that I will have and I will take with me. But I like to think I'm
Mm.
trying to make up for it now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's never too late to vote, I guess, in a
exactly.
non-compulsory voting environment. Yeah. So my second question actually to you, Edwin, is going now to your life after university. So prior to Parliament, you worked as a property manager for the Department of Public Works. Are you able to talk a little bit about your work as a property manager and what sort of entities and government services were you managing?
Sure. So as I mentioned, my studies were in the built environment at the University of Cape Town, which it's a very well sought after qualification, but not a very common one in South Africa. And what it does is it recognizes the need for assets that are of great value, such as property or immovable property, buildings, land, etc., to be properly managed. And it's something that is extremely relevant to to our government because our government is, and most governments are, the biggest asset owners in each country. But the qualification really sort of looked at, you could go into the banking space and manage property finance, or you could go into the legal space and do property law. So essentially, it was a very well-rounded degree that could have been applied in the private or public sector, but fortunately, by the time that I started university, the provincial government in KwaZulu-Natal recognized the need for this skill. And
Mhm.
so they put forward a bursary program, which I applied for and which I was fortunately very successful to get into. And I had my studies paid for me in
Oh,
exchange for me giving up my time when I graduated to actually become qualified, post qualification qualified to sign off on my own work, to then be employed by the department to undertake the work that it was paying or outsourcing at the time. So so yes, so I like you mentioned have worked in total 11 years for the Department of Public Works and Infrastructure, just so that the viewers can understand what that department is responsible for. At a provincial government level, it's responsible for all the infrastructure related to provincial government functions, such as education, so all your schools, your high schools, your hospitals and your clinics, your sports facilities, and so when I worked for the first 5 years of my career, that was at the provincial government level in KwaZulu-Natal. So I did come back to KwaZulu-Natal after I
mm,
graduated, and then was headhunted by the Western Cape province 5 years later, and then moved to the Western Cape, where I worked under the same department but for a different province. And what's
mm,
quite interesting is that while I worked in KwaZulu-Natal, the KwaZulu-Natal province was governed by the ANC. So I was essentially working under a government of the ANC, but obviously within the administration. And then moving to the Western Cape, I was doing the same job basically, but under a DA or Democratic Alliance government. And so, yeah, so essentially, when you look at what the department's responsibilities are, it's responsible for the construction, the maintenance of these buildings and these properties, of which, they are worth, I mean, the total of asset value, you're looking at about 14, what's it, about 14 billion Australian dollars. Sorry, I just tried to do a little calculation for you. That is just for the Western Cape. I can't remember what the KwaZulu-Natal portfolio value was or was worth. But yeah, essentially not just that, but then also overseeing all the buying, the selling, the leasing, as well as all the information management of all these assets. So if you think about it, I think KwaZulu-Natal owned about 8,000 pieces of land, the Western Cape government about 6,000. So, there's a lot of information that is associated or attached to each piece of property. And that all has to be sort of centralized and managed to be able to be an effective asset manager, of which I won't say our government is great at yet, but it's something that we are definitely trying to improve on, and to bring our standards up to that of similar to Australia, Singapore. I mean, we're doing a lot of research around the various other countries that
Mm.
are good at asset management. And so that's where our research is focusing us at the moment. And hopefully we can learn even from your government on how to manage our assets better. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's in a nutshell what we do, or what we
That's
did.
quite, yeah, that is very, very interesting there. And touching on the fact, with your university studies that the KwaZulu-Natal government actually paid for you to do your university study. That's actually a very good initiative, I think. And we don't even have those sort of initiatives in Australia, where, a government
Really,
actually pays for your university education, but then you work for the government afterwards. And I think that's a great idea to really try and boost the amount of demand and the amount of people actually studying courses like you did at university, Edwin. And it's a really good strategy to try and increase those sort of increase the working population in those industries. Because as you were saying before, not many people go to University of Cape Town and study what you studied. So it's a good way that the government's found to try and entice people to study, different sorts of degrees at an undergraduate level and a honors level.
100%. I mean, I can't fault our government in having been able to identify where it has skills shortages. But also, I didn't mention it earlier, but I do come from a lower to middle class family, or I was middle to lower class at the time. And so they have a way in which they recognize these sorts of disparities within the family context. And so they have ways in which they do support people like myself at the time, who was basically trying to put themselves through university because my parents couldn't afford to do it for me. And so I got lucky to a large degree, but I also worked very hard. So I like
Mm,
to think that I earned my spot, if I can put
yeah,
it
that's
that
the
way.
important, at the end of the day, government support can only get you so far. You gotta have the talent to get in. So, it's still a great initiative though to have that sort of thing, and reward those sort of the hard work that a lot of students put in, throughout their high school lives to get into the university course that they want to do.
100%,
Mm,
100%.
yeah. So our next question for you, Edwin, talks more about your career in provincial property information management. So, as you said, after you working for the KwaZulu-Natal government, you worked for the Western Cape government for nearly 6 years, serving as the Deputy Director of Provincial Property Information Management and as the Deputy Director of Property Acquisition and Disposal. Can you talk about your experiences working for the Western Cape government and some of the things that you've learnt working there that you can now use in your own political career, seeing as the Western Cape government at that point was DA controlled, which is the political party that you represent now?
100%. So I think what was so interesting for me, Francis, was that I was identified by the department when I was about 25 years old, and at that point I kind of felt and saw myself reaching a sort of ceiling within the KwaZulu-Natal government, and so it was a very welcome invitation to come and interview for the job that I then took at the Western Cape government. And being very honest, I came into a team where I was the youngest person on that team, managing people that were much older than me, people who had been working for government for a very long time. Because you may not be aware of this, but in South Africa, our labor laws are very protective of the worker. And so also what you find is that in government, once you start working for government, it's very hard. Well, many people get very comfortable there and choose not to grow or not to seek other opportunities. And so you find this being the case more often than not. If you had a look at the age makeup of our government departments, you'd find that there's a lot of older people, and not as many young people, although that is changing now. So I think, being recognized by the government of the Western Cape to come in and take on a largely neglected responsibility at that point, I felt certainly recognized and seen for my skill, my ability, and my education. But I think what I learned the most was how to work with people. And I think it's something that I'm very grateful that I've managed to be able to grow into and to adapt to, but by doing it authentically and being myself. I like to see myself as a people's person, and I like to see myself as a leader. And so that is also where I suppose the beginning of my political journey, you might be able to say, started, because people, regardless of, regardless of who they are, managing people it's a political skill, I guess. You're always
Mm-hmm.
negotiating, you're navigating personalities and backgrounds and all these kinds of things. And ultimately, there's a job that needs to be done, and you need to find a way to do it. And normally, you need to do it with other people. So, very early on in my career in the Western Cape government, I found myself developing a very democratic leadership style, where I would prefer to bring people, regardless of what level they were employed at, into a boardroom, and we just thrash out what the issues are, what the challenges are, and we put solutions on the table, and we collectively pave the way pave the way forward. And that's how I've always sort of managed, and that's how I've always sort of led. And it worked really well for me within the Western Cape government. While I was there, like you mentioned, I held two different job titles. And I mean, it would be a bit boring to go into, what those jobs, entailed holistically. But what I found more exciting was being able to develop my leadership skills and be able to put those skills to use together with the education and experience that I had developed to actually sort of overhaul the system and change the way of thinking within that administrative space, to be able to actually deliver better, faster, more efficiently, more cost effectively, and to actually bring the moral like, the morale within the team up. I brought energy. I don't know if I don't know if all employees that are young start like this and then they sort of lose steam over
Mm.
time. I certainly feel like I've still got a lot of steam in me. And I mean, we are almost 10 years, 10 years later since I moved to the department in
Hopefully
the
it continues
Western
for a
Cape.
longer period of time.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
hope it. I hope it will. I hope it will, because I kind of find you need to give a lot of energy to
Mm.
to get things moving. And I don't know what it's like in Australia. I don't know what it's like within the Australian government administration, but government wheels seem to turn very slowly wherever you
Mm.
go.
Mm.
And so this is what excites me about, being in government. As a youngster, and with government recognizing and bringing more youth into the administrative space, is that you are finding more innovation, you're finding more exciting solutions being brought forward. And depending on the kind of leader that is leading within those spaces, there's so much opportunity and there's so much that can be improved on. We don't have to keep doing things the way that we've always done them. Things are not going to get better by doing things over and over the same way. So yeah, so I think that really highlights and summarizes, my experience in the Western Cape government. Of course, I felt like I also reached a ceiling there and I needed to sort of explore other opportunities. And so I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but from there I spent a year and a bit with the city of Cape Town, which is a local government sphere, but it is also the best run metro in South Africa, also run by the Democratic Alliance, or governed by the Democratic Alliance. And that was just me simply wanting to stretch my wings and try things out in a different sphere of government, and come to understand, not just move on from understanding the provincial government systems and looking at the local government systems, where I also have a lot of interest. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It's a very good answer there. And we're up now to our fourth question for you, Edwin. So, as an Australian listener, there's been many funny moments in South African Parliament over the years that you can watch on YouTube and you can see online. But for you personally, how has your experience been in Parliament over these last 3 to 4 months, being newly elected? And was there anything you did not expect or you were surprised about finding out?
Francis, uh, as my friends and my family know, my life has literally been flipped on its side in the last 4 months. And I went from being a full-time employee in the administrative side of government, to then literally overnight, over the course of the election and being sworn in as an MP, have now entered into this whole new world of politics and parliament and constituencies and yeah, so to say that it's been overwhelming is an understatement. And do I suffer from imposter syndrome, not knowing, my left from my right at the moment? Yes, I do. But yeah, I think just being a part of this parliament and this new government. I mean, we have new political parties in the House, many of them, and we have this really amazing and interesting new national government of unity, where we see our party, the Democratic Alliance, in government, in national government for the very first time in South Africa's democracy. And I think for me, what is most interesting, being what we call a backbencher, anyone who's new to the party or new to parliament, we sit at the back and we observe and we learn as we find our feet. It's actually just been watching and trying to understand how we are navigating this new space in government. Not so long ago, 4 months ago, we were in the opposition benches and we were fighting against the ANC, or we were trying to help the ANC govern better or implement better policies and laws. And now we are in government with them. And just so seeing how the party is navigating these new waters together with the ANC within the government of national unity has been most interesting for me. And now also seeing, how the other parties respond to us as the Democratic Alliance, together with the ANC within the National Assembly or within our debates and our mini plenaries, etc. It's a whole new world. It's a whole new political spectrum. And I think for me, coming in as someone who has very little political experience, and that's the beauty, I think, about our government. And I mean, our electoral system and our way of, forming government is that, you don't necessarily have to have the qualification in politics or a lot of experience in politics to be elected. You just need to be able to offer what you offer, and for that to be enough for your party to put you forward. So yeah, I think, it's all new for me. I didn't expect anything. I'm still trying to figure my way out around Parliament. I don't even know, where some of the buildings are, or, where some of
Which door,
the
where
restaurants
the door
are.
leads, basically.
Exactly, exactly. So, you're always getting to Parliament at least an hour before your meeting because, you never know where on that precinct you need to be. So yeah, it's all new, it's all exciting, and it's all very, very much a privilege. And I like being lost for once. It's nice to be lost so that you can help yourself be found and to navigate these new spaces. Yeah, so that would probably sum up the last 4 months of my time in Parliament, observing
Yeah.
mostly.
Hopefully you haven't been spending a lot of those 4 months getting lost, in the corridors and going into the wrong door in Parliament. I've actually never been to South African Parliament. Is it quite big? Is it quite a massive building in South Africa? I think I heard a couple of years ago there was a part that got burnt down. Um
Yes. So first of all, if you ever do decide to come and visit South Africa, you are more than welcome to come and visit, and I will show you around. The Parliament precinct itself, I wouldn't say is massive, but there are a number of buildings. I think about 17 buildings, some of which are really big, and others smaller. But yeah, it's a historical precinct, and it's really beautiful with beautiful old buildings. And you correctly did say so. In 2022, unfortunately, due to an arsonist attack, the National Assembly building was burnt down. Not completely, but from within the National Assembly chamber, completely ruined and burnt to smithereens. And the fire extended over into the old Assembly building as well. And so Parliament is currently under construction or reconstruction. It's about a 2 billion rand or $200 million Australian dollar project, which we will hopefully see completed in 2026. And unfortunately, there's no venue on the Parliament precinct that can house all 400 MPs. So we are using one of the older chambers at the moment and rationalizing between the different parties based on their percentage of vote, how many, MPs from each party get to
hmm.
attend in-person sessions. So the DA at the moment has 25 seats, and the rest of us sit and attend online. But yeah, you're always welcome. And if any of the listeners are listening and they want to tour, if they're in Cape Town, they just need to reach out, and we'll happily show them around.
It's a great place to visit. The great beaches, mountain ranges, everything. So,
Beautiful.
going down even going to Durban itself, and going to KwaZulu-Natal and all different parts of Africa would be, quite an interesting experience. So, hopefully down the line we get to meet in person, Edward, and we can, even if you come to Australia, and come to Melbourne, I can happily give you a tour around Victorian Parliament, around Melbourne itself. So, it'd be great to see you, and even going to South Africa, as you said, would be a great experience overall.
Please come.
Yes. We will try and organize something, Edward. I'll try and get Tobias and George to come as well. So,
There you go.
I'm guessing not many, because South Africa does have does have a bit of a bad sort of reputation in the world around crime and that sort of thing. So, going to South Africa and actually experiencing what it's like, is something, that most people should try and do. And, sometimes, there is crime and that sort of thing, but, there's a lot of good people as well there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So coming on down to our next question, Edwin. So who would you actually say is your political role model and idol? And I'm very interested to hear what you actually say, because there's in politics in South Africa, as you said, it's been very turbulent over the last 60, 70 years or so. So who would you actually say is your political role model and idol?
I was thinking about this question ahead of the interview, and I'm probably not going to give an answer that is going to satisfy you and all the listeners. But I really must say that I have been, and I must give credit to the people who have inspired me to follow this journey. And they may not necessarily be people that the viewers would be familiar with, but the Democratic Alliance here in South Africa, what I've come to love so much about it is the way in which it creates and gives opportunity to young, innovative, inspiring individuals who truly love South Africa and want to do their best for South Africa. And to give you maybe two examples. The capital city of South Africa, Pretoria, now known as Tshwane, was an ANC-run metropolitan, which was run into the ground, unfortunately, and is in complete ruin. However, through a coalition government, the DA are now co-governing in Tshwane under the leadership of a gentleman by the name of Cilliers Brink. He's a young South African. He was a former NP, but left his position to go and take up the mayorship there.
Mm,
And he has, together with his team and under his leadership, really done everything in his power to turn the rudder of that metropolitan council around and to restore dignity and reprioritize funding and just stabilize that government and that city.
mm,
And so there's still a very long way to go. But I look at someone like Cilliers, for example, and someone like him really inspires me and inspired me to actually take up this journey. I've only met him once or twice, but I've seen the work that he's done, and my brother-in-law actually knows him well and works in his office. And so I think he's doing a fantastic job and at a lot of personal sacrifice. We have another young mayor, Christopher Pappas, who happened to become the first DA mayor in KwaZulu-Natal for a small for a small local government, also taken over from the ANC. And I live in this municipality, and I've seen since 2021, when the last local government elections were, completely turn this municipality around with his team through his leadership.
mm,
And so I'm not going to give you the typical answers that you might be looking out for, but it's really these individuals who go largely unnoticed, who have significant impact on not just, the people that they serve, but the community and the infrastructure and the space and the feeling of the places that they govern. But it would be silly for me not to mention also Helen Zille,
mm. I was about to
the
say her name actually.
Yes, the federal chairperson of our council and former mayor of Cape Town. She, through coalition government, took the seat of mayor in Cape Town in 2006 after a lot of hard work and a lot of negotiation and a lot of building the DA up from where it was in 22 in the mid 1990s. And through the leadership and governance style that she brought to the city of Cape Town, the DA was 3 years later able to win the province of the Western Cape, where she became premier, paving the way for other premiers to come through after her, and also other DA mayors to come into the city of Cape Town, like Jordan Hill Lewis. So these are really people that inspire me, really people who give me hope in a collective and happy future for all South Africans. And so they would be who I would dedicate I won't say idol, I don't like to think that I idolize anybody, but they inspire me and they motivate me and they are people that I look up to. And I mean, ultimately, I must also mention, obviously, Nelson Mandela, because none of us would be where we are today. South Africa wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for the sacrifices that he made and the legacy that he left, and the path and the vision for this country that we still all fight for, give up for, and hope for every day. So, yeah, there's a few names for you there.
Yeah, I was gonna expect Nelson Mandela and Helen Zille, but it was great to mention those other great MPs and mayors that you've mentioned there, who may not be known a lot to Australian politicians out there, not Australian politicians, sorry, Australian viewers. So
Yeah.
it's really good to see that sort of change and that systemic change that they've been able to make. As you said, the mayor of your municipality, he's only been there for 3 years, but he's made such a great amount of change in the area. And, it's really, really important that, that's recognized and that's shown because at the end of the day, coming into government in any sort of situation, after a long time of one party rule is quite challenging. So,
Mm,
being able to work through those sort of challenges and being able to,
mm.
you know, create the best outcomes for the people of the municipality, of the province, of the nation in general is really, really important. And it's something, a lot of politicians should strive to continue to fight for.
Yeah, and Francis, I also must give a shout out to my fellow colleagues in the National Assembly who work with me every day. These individuals all have something to offer. They all have something that they want to change, and they all sacrifice like I do. Their time. As you know, politicians we don't really keep work hours. They just your life is politics. But my for the majority of my colleagues inspire me every day with what they believe in, what they fight for, and what they are in the assembly for. And yeah, I think we all just have a single vision of a better South Africa, and that's what keeps us all going.
For sure, for sure. And at the end of the day, that sort of as I've previously said this on the podcast before that one of the Australian MPs greatly articulated this point that you bring up, Edwin. At the end of the day, different political parties, they have different views and opinions, but they all people all get elected to parliament to do one thing, to make the country, the state, the province, the municipality, the city, or even just the ward a better place for all the people who live in that area.
Mm.
So we may have different policies, we may have different opinions, we may have different ways of achieving that better life outcome for people. But at the end of the day, we do have that one core value, which is to make the lives of our people that we represent better.
Absolutely.
Yes. So our next question then for you, Edwin, this is our second last question for you. Hopefully I haven't taken too much of your day, out of your
No.
busy schedule at all. But our next question for you is, what made you run in the 2024 national election in South Africa? And going back to what made you join the Democratic Alliance?
Um, I'll try and keep this answer simple. So as you know, and as I've mentioned throughout this interview, I've spent the better part of my working career working in the administration of government, right? And as you know, party and state are separate or should be separate. And part of my personality is always wanting to get things done and make whatever I'm given better. And so that has been what I've tried to do with my career since the very beginning. And I like to think I've done a lot and I've managed to change a lot for the better. However, towards the last, let's say rather over the last 2, 3 years, I have realized how important it is for the state to be able to work with the politics of the political sphere or spectrum. And so I had asked myself, whether or not I thought perhaps I could have a greater influence and be able to achieve more or drive better change or faster change or more effective change if I weren't maybe, if I didn't maybe put myself into the political space. And so when the opportunity came last year, May, to put my name forward for the selection process for Parliament or for one of the provincial legislatures, my thought was, well, what have I got to lose? Let's just put my name down. And I was actually encouraged by a colleague of mine now who said, you know what, at least you'll get to understand what the process looks like and feels like. And maybe, yeah, you probably won't get in, you probably won't make it, but at least you'll have an idea so that
With that
next time,
experience,
maybe when you,
yeah, and being a part of a
exactly,
campaign.
exactly. Exactly. And I thought, okay, well then maybe 2029 will be my year, So I'm so happy that I put my name down and that I made the sacrifices that I made. I was working a full-time job. I was doing my second year of my master's. And as you would know, an election campaign is a very, very dramatic and time-consuming
Mhm.
um, thing to be a part of. And yeah, so that's where, that's how I came to decide to join politics and become a part of the Democratic Alliance. The reason why I chose the Democratic Alliance is very simple. I'm in my early 30s now, and at this point in my life, I like to think I know what my core values and principles are. And I did a lot of research. I actually have a notebook quite similar to this one where I did a lot of research on all the different political parties because believe it or not, I only joined the Democratic Alliance in January last year. So I joined in January. I ran for parliament. I started running for parliament in May. And by March the following year, when the lists were released, I was essentially secure. My seat was secure. And what it all came down to was the alignment of my values and my principles with that of the Democratic Alliance. I'll say up front, there's no such thing as a perfect political party, just like there's no
Yeah.
perfect human being. But the core principles of freedom, of fairness, of opportunity and diversity, which are the four key values of the Democratic Alliance, really spoke to me. And, coming from a country that is very racially divided, you just need to watch one sitting of parliament where the camera scans over the 400 MPs to see that where the Democratic Alliance sit, there is one party that represents all of South Africa's people. And it is also a party that did not stem from, the former apartheid government. Helen Suzman, one of the stalwarts of our party, was the single person in parliament in the late 1950s who stood up and against racialism and racial division and apartheid. And these principles that I've mentioned, freedom, fairness, opportunity, diversity, are the same founding principles of the party back then. And so the party has stood the test of time and has grown since then. And I think it's largely due to those values and those principles. So it's a no-brainer for me. And the people that you see doing the work that they're doing is a testament to the party and what it's trying to achieve in South Africa. Let me end there so we can get to the final question.
Well, on to our final question for Edwin Macrae Bath, our most important question actually on the podcast. So, finally, what's one piece of advice you'd give to students in 2024, especially those probably in South Africa who are about to start university and high school?
So, Francis, I think this is a very important question. And each and every single individual out there has their own journey, and I think it's important that we respect each other's journey. But the advice that I would give is to be as open-minded as possible throughout your journey, whether it's through high school and whether it's university. And no matter how difficult life might feel for you where you are at this point in time, don't ever give up and don't ever pass up an opportunity or an open door that comes your way. Know that you are going to make mistakes and there are going to be things that you won't understand. But remember that whether you're starting high school or whether you're in high school or starting university or in university, that the road ahead is very long and there's no mistake or no failure that you can't come back from. And the best advice that I can give is to just see that mistake or that failure as a learning opportunity. Don't ever give up. Find whatever brings you strength and whatever gives you courage or whatever motivates you to do what you do or what motivates you to get out of bed every day and focus on that. And keep focusing on it until you actually achieve or reach your goal. But also make sure you have a goal. Yeah, I think just knowing that anything is possible. I did not know that I would end up working for government when I started university. I didn't actually have my bursary when I started. I actually only got it some way into my studies, and that was because a door opened, and I chose to walk through that door. And then another door opened, and the next thing, I was on a graduate program, and then I was working in government, and then I moved to another government, and then I ended up where I am now in the National Assembly of the South African Parliament, which is somewhere I never saw myself. Not even last year, January. Like I said, I wasn't even a member. I wasn't even a member of the Democratic Alliance, but here I am. So anything is possible. Just believe in yourself. Don't give up, and it's okay to have bad days. So yeah, I just hope that everyone can find the courage to take the opportunities that are placed before them. And just also remember one thing, is that no one is going to do anything for you. You need to find the way to do it yourself.
Mm.
You need to really find it in yourself to pick yourself up and to motivate yourself and to fight for your dream. And hopefully that dream is to make whatever space you're in a better space to be. And I think if you can do that, then you're doing really, really well.
As you were saying there, sometimes the door doesn't open. Other people won't open the door for you. So, you got to open the door for yourself and, achieve what you want to achieve and set those goals. And if you don't have any of those goals, spend some time trying to set out what you want to achieve. Because at the end of the day, anything really is possible in the world. We live in a society where, things can chop and change all the time. So, always holding out hope and always believing in yourself, I think is the best way forward to achieving what you want to achieve and being as successful as you want to be.
Absolutely.
Yes.
100%.
So those are all our questions for you, Edwin. I do really appreciate you coming on the podcast and speaking to us for nearly over 90 minutes. It's been quite a long podcast here, but it's been great to speak to you on and off the camera, of course, and hear about your experiences prior to Parliament working in government and some advice you'd give to students in 2024. So, from the whole from myself, George and Tobias, we do appreciate you coming on. And you're our first South African MP, so hopefully the first of many. So you'll have that in history for the Don't Give Up podcast. So thank you again for coming on, and thank you again for talking to us.
Thank you so much for having me, Francis, and good luck with what you're doing. I think it's amazing, and I think it's relevant, and I think it's important. So well done to you and your team.